So maybe I'll start and introduce myself. I'm Ben Rubin, and I'm a faculty member in the biology department here at Western. One of the things I do, the absolute best thing I do every year in terms of it being enjoyable for me, but in terms of, I think, actually making a connection with students and being able to see them get excited about something, is teaching a field course. And so I want to tell you about the field course program that we have at Western. It's really a cooperative program throughout Ontario. And I'll tell you a little bit about what it's like to be on a field course and how you go about getting yourself signed up to do that if you're interested in it. Everything I'm going to say about field courses is good except for one thing, so when we get to that, I'll tell you. This is, as I said, a cooperative program among Ontario universities. This year we're offering 30 courses. They're all over the world. So we have some in Asia, Africa, South America, Central America, and the US and Canada. And you can go to different places. You can study different things. You can go there at different times. This is a little schematic of the year. You can see that there's a whole bunch of them that go out right after exams in the beginning of summer. And there's a bunch toward the end of summer, and there are a couple of other ones at odd times. But you have some flexibility in terms of when you go, where you go, what life is like there, and what you learn. The way the system works, you get credit for a biology course, just as if you had taken the course here on campus. This is a lab course, and it is an essay course. So you get credit for all of those things. It counts towards a biology module. It can count towards an environmental science module. Generally, these are small classes. So the course that I teach, we go to the Adirondack Mountains, which is upstate New York. I take 20 students. A lot of the other courses are kind of in that range. You can study with faculty members here at Western. So I mentioned that I teach one, and there are 3 other modules that we're offering by Western faculty members. But if we don't have the expertise in whatever it is that you're primarily interested in and want to learn about, this is an opportunity where you can tap into expertise that's not here at Western. So there's a course on turtles. We don't have a turtle expert on the faculty. There are courses there's a course in urban ecology. We don't have an urban ecologist in the biology department. And then there are 26 other courses offered by other institutions. Whether or not you take a course led by a Western instructor, doesn't matter. The rest of this is still the same. So that's sort of the nuts and bolts. But I think more important than that is that these are chances to really get out in the field and do things yourself. So most of us can learn from a lecture, can learn from being spoken to and told how things work, can learn from reading about how things work, but learn better if we do it ourselves. And if that sounds like you, then that is one of the key advantages. The other thing is, if you're thinking in the back of your mind, well, when I graduate, I'm not quite sure what I want to be, but maybe some sort of research or some sort of field biology is one of the considerations. This is a chance to kind of try the life a little bit, and you only made a commitment for about 2 weeks. If it didn't turn out to be what you wanted, that's really valuable to learn that now after investing 2 weeks instead of signing up for a master's degree where you're now committed 2 years to something. This is the bad part. I told you there was one. The way these courses work is, since we go to remote locations and live there, there are transportation costs, there's food costs, there's lodging costs, there's sometimes cost for access or for instructors outside of, or guides outside of the primary professor. Ontario universities have no funding to cover these courses. They provide us nothing. So our only source of money to cover this is to turn to the students who take the courses and say, well, this is the total cost of running this course, and we're going to need you to each chip in a fraction in order to pay for it. So the course fees, this year the cheapest one is $350. The most expensive is almost $5,000. It depends where you're going. It depends what you're doing. Obviously, going to Africa costs a lot more than going to Algonquin Park. The other thing to keep in mind when you're looking at this at the website and you're thinking about different courses is think about what is included in those fees. So the course fees, some of them might include almost everything you need to pay. In my course, for example, the course fee includes your transportation, your food, and your lodging for 2 weeks. If you're willing to bring a lunch with you for the first afternoon before we get to the research station, you can spend the entire week and not spend a single penny out of your pocket and be fine. Other ones, course might not include everything. Some of them include air travel, some of them don't include air travel. So when you're looking at those prices, make sure that you're keeping in mind, okay, is this really the full cost, or is this like part of the cost, and then make your decision accordingly. The fees are set up to not run at a profit and not run at a deficit. We try to break even every year and take in the money and use the money to run the course. I should say one other thing about these course fees are not tuition, and therefore they're not tax deductible in the same way that tuition is. There is some financial aid that is available from several sources. Jack Miller is retired now. He was an instructor who taught field course for a long time. He's the one that introduced me to this and sat down when I was younger than I am now and had a full head of hair. And he said, Ben, this is the best kind of teaching. Why don't you teach a field course? And so he set up this fund where if you take a North American course and if you qualify for work study, you can get some money to go toward the expenses of the course. There are two other potential sources at Western. So Western International offers some funding. There's the International Learning Award. So that would be for an international course. And you would need to have a 70 average in order to get that. And there's also the Global Opportunities Award. And so that would also have to be an international course, and those are also given out based on academic achievement. So this is kind of like the highlights of the requirements. If you're thinking about taking a field course and want to look into these sources of aid, these are on the Western International website. There's links to all of them on the biology field course website, and you should go there and look at the details of exactly how they work. I'm going to talk a little bit about course content, and what I say basically about all these courses is kind of like a generalization of how a bunch of courses work that may not apply to every single course. So when you're signing up for a course, you want to read the course outline. They're relatively detailed. It's a kind of a, we call it a two-pager, but the second page might actually be longer than a page. The first page is your basic course outline stuff. It tells you how you're going to be graded, what the cost is, when the field course goes and where. The second one is titled A Typical Day. And so it tells you kind of what life is like there, where you're going to get your food, what kind of place are you going to live in, what kind of weather you're going to experience, what kind of hazards are there, what kind of activities you're going to do. So what I'm going to talk about is kind of general of a typical course as much as I can, but you can kind of get the feeling from some of the pictures I'm showing maybe that it's very variable. So you might go someplace wet, you might go someplace dry, you could go aquatic, terrestrial, far away, close by, hot, cold, and your experience is going to differ. In terms of content, so identifying stuff in the field is one thing that a lot of courses cover. I found when I graduated, when I got my undergrad, I was a student at McGill and I got a degree in biology, and I came out and I felt kind of ashamed because I just got a degree in biology and I couldn't identify anything, like not a tree, not a bug, and it was only years later that I realized, well, actually, we don't really teach that stuff a lot to students, so it's not the students' fault. Like, I should not have been ashamed at all, except we do teach it in field courses, and it is a skill that's useful for field biology jobs. Another theme that's important in many of these courses is designing studies and experiments, and that's also a valuable resume line. That, you know, in most of the courses, you will be expected to, there'll be sort of the first half or 2/3 of the course is a little bit of show and tell. The instructor will take you around and show you stuff, and then they'll turn to you and say, okay, why don't you put together some sort of study and measure something and then write about it later. And they'll guide you through that, so you get some help with it, but you get a feeling of what science really is. That's the scientific process, and that's what we as biologists do for a living. You'll learn how to measure stuff in the field. So depending what you're measuring, if it's sea turtles, it's going to be different than if it's wildflowers, but in some way you'll learn some sampling techniques. And often you'll learn some about the natural history of the area you're going to. That's typical. In terms of assessment, most include a final report after you get back. So typically these field courses are approximately 2 weeks. I think they're supposed to be at least 12 days in the field. It may be plus or minus a day or two. When you get back, you're writing something about what you did. Oftentimes you collected data because you designed an experiment and now you're writing up a report about that. Many include some sort of field journal, some sort of field log, sometimes blog entries about what your experiences are, sometimes reflective writing, that type of thing in the field. So that's often a component, not always. Participation and enthusiasm is typically in most courses. This is capped at a maximum of 20%, so it's important to participate. We also don't want the instructor to have complete freedom in terms of assigning any grade they want because they just said you participated really well and you not so much. So there is a subjective element here, and we try and keep that too. But you can expect something most. And then there could be other things. Some courses have exams, some have no exams. Some have, you're assigned to do something, read something, write something before you go. Some you're not assigned to do anything before you go. Some you're assigned to give a presentation while you're there. Some you're not. So there's a fair amount of variety.